Hello everyone and welcome to the 30-Minute Gospel. My name is Chris and I'll be your host as we open and study the Bible together. I'll be reading from the King James Version, but you can feel free to read whichever translation that best suits you. I would just recommend that you have a version that does not delete verses from God's holy word. Each video will be a biblical teaching of 30 minutes or less. My material is completely 100% free, so you can share these videos with family members, co-workers, friends, or anyone you know who either needs to hear the Word of God or wants to study it in a casual setting. The gospel is free to all, so I will not accept any donations, gifts, or beg viewers for money. Please give to your local church or a Christian organization of your choosing. You can reach out to me with questions or comments at 30minutegospel@gmail.com, but please keep your message respectful and cordial. Well, welcome again, everybody, to the 30-Minute Gospel. We've been on a subject discussing about Christians in the nation of Israel. Where we last left off, I was doing a little bit of a history lesson of the Genesis 12:3 curse and how that curse has played out. When God says that I will bless those that bless thee and curse those that curse thee, talking to Abraham and his seed, he meant that. Okay, God is not joking around with that curse. He means it. He calls the Jewish people in the book of Zechariah, I think it is, in the 2nd chapter, he calls them the apple of his eye. Okay? They mean something to him. He is married to them, as we explained earlier. And so he does take offense to that. Okay, and he does get very angry with it too as well. All right, and we've shown you, I talked about the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks. We were in the middle of the Roman Empire, and I explained to you how Titus surrounded that city, okay, and starved them out. And he burned down the city and burned down the temple, and they built the arch to Titus for his victory, and he pillaged the temple and all of that. And when Titus became emperor, not long after he was there were two major disasters. One, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius on Pompeii. The destruction of Pompeii did not happen very long after he became emperor. And second of all, a big fire broke out in Rome, which burned half the city down. And it burned down the temple to Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter is Zeus. That's the main god of the Greek-Roman world. It burned it down. Because Obadiah chapter 1, or the only chapter, verse 15 of Obadiah says, what you've done will be brought back on your own head, meaning what you've done against the Jewish people will be brought back on your own head. You burn down his temple, you burn down God's temple, God burns down your temple. Okay? And Titus's last words that he ever said before he died was, I've made but one mistake. And I know what that one mistake was. I think he knew what that one mistake was. He challenged the God of the universe. And he had to pay the price for that. By killing and destroying the holy city, and by killing his chosen people, the Israelites, he had to pay a price for that. Okay? He had to pay a price for that. All right? And then, of course, in just kind of continuing on from there, because we're doing a little bit of a history lesson, Hadrian is eventually, the Jewish people are going to revolt in 135, around 130 to 135 AD, when the Roman Emperor Hadrian is in power. Most people know Hadrian for the giant wall he built in England to keep the Celtic people out. It's called Hadrian's Wall. A lot of it's still intact to this day. Most people remember it, if you're of my age, remember in the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, where Kevin Costner is kind of like walking on top of it when he gets back to England and all of that. That's Hadrian's Wall. It's still standing almost 1900 years later. But he's known for that. But what Hadrian did when the Jews revolted again, it wasn't as big of a revolt as the one in 70 AD, but when they revolted again, Hadrian completely crushed them. And what he's going to do is he's going to say, I don't want the name Judea to appear on any more of the Roman maps. So what he did was he renamed the area Palestine. That's where we get the word Palestine or Palestinian from. Palestine is the Latin word for Philistine, okay, who were the ancient enemies of the Jewish people. Okay, as you know, Goliath of Gath was the most famous Philistine. And so they renamed it Palestine to kind of be a derogatory kind of punch in the gut to the Israelite people. Okay, so the Romans also continued to persecute the Jewish people and also Christians. I want to make that clear. They did do that too as well for a long time. They didn't stop persecuting Christians until Constantine, which we're going to talk about that in another video dealing with this in the nation of Israel, one of the future ones, about how the separation between the Christian church and the Jewish people, because most of the church used to be Jewish. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So what happened was, of course, Rome began to fall. Okay, and so the Germanic tribes were revolting against them. They were breaking up all these areas the Franks are going to take the area which is known as France, for example. Well, the Visigoths invade Italy, and Alaric, their leader, is going to go after the city of Rome. Okay, he's going to go after the city of Rome. So he is, guess what he does to Rome? As you could probably guess from the previous video, Titus surrounded the city of Jerusalem and starved the people out. Alaric is going to surround the city of Rome and starve the people out. Why does that happen? Because what you do against them will be brought back on your own head. And we know this is true too. There's even a Bible example of this too. If you all remember, before I'm just kind of taking a little bit of a detour here. If you remember what happened with Haman and the Persian people, Haman had built the gallows for Mordecai. Okay, but then he was hung on those same gallows. If some of you remember that story in the book of Esther. Okay, he's hung on those same gallows. So you see this kind of playing out. But Alaric, the Visigoth, is going to starve the city out. And then in 410 AD, he's going to enter in Rome in what's known as the very famous sacking of Rome. You know, where he comes in and the Goths come in and they just completely, the Visigoths come in and completely desecrate the city. They're going to destroy many of the things like the Colosseum and all these things. Are going to go into the mausoleum of Augustus. You know, Caesar Augustus had built this grand mausoleum where a lot of the emperors of the Roman Empire, their ashes were interred in there. So it was like a museum. You could go in and see the ashes of like Julius Caesar and all these other people that were there, all the emperors. And the Visigoths went in there and ransacked the thing and threw out all the ashes. They were scattered everywhere. Okay, they're going to bring down the whole city. Okay, they destroy a lot of the infrastructure there. But there's going to be one thing left standing. One thing left, one of the few things that was left standing, it was untouched. And that was the Arch of Titus, which I explained in the last video was built in commemoration for his victory against the Jewish people and the ransacking of the city of Jerusalem. Okay. Why did that arch, why did they not destroy that arch? I think the reason why they didn't destroy that arch is because God basically put it in their hearts not to. Why? That arch is a reminder to people in Rome that the reason why that city was ransacked and ended up in ruins was because of what they did to the nation of Israel. It's standing up there. So every time you go and you see now the city of Rome has rebuilt itself, but every time you go and see the ruins of the Colosseum, the ruins of the Parthenon, all of those ruins that are all the city ruins that were the ancient city of Rome, when you go and see that, the reason why those things are in ruins, the Arch of Titus is the reason, or is telling you the reason why. So everybody knows. You look up at the Arch of Titus, you see the ransacking of Jerusalem, you go, that makes sense why this city looks like that. Okay? It's a reminder. So you'll never forget it. It's kind of like if you go to Israel, if you go to Jerusalem, they have the Pillar of Absalom that stands there. That Pillar of Absalom, when the Jewish, it's supposed to be, according to tradition, so that Jewish people, when they pass by it, especially if they are children, know not to be disobedient children. What happens to them when they become disobedient children? It's supposed to remind them of the story of Absalom and his disobedience to David, and how he tried to overthrow David and his father and everything. And so that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a reminder there. That arch is a reminder of why the city ended up being in ruins. Okay? And Rome is going to go into a dark age for 1,000 years. Nobody's going to want to do any business with them. You challenge them, this is what's going to happen. Okay? Europe goes into a dark ages for 1,000 years because of that. Okay? Now here's another example. Right before the country of Spain and the Spanish Empire, this is another example. Spain was initially three kingdoms. It was Aragon. It was Aragon, Castile, and Portugal. Okay. Well, they were going to try to unite all of them. Portugal didn't want to unite, so Ferdinand and Isabella united the kingdoms of Aragon and the kingdoms of Castile together to form the country of Spain. Okay. Now, in 1490, after they had united, they signed basically a law that told the Jewish people that were there in the country of Spain, the newly founded country of Spain, that you can either convert to Catholicism, or you can be expelled from this country. Most of them didn't want to convert, so they expelled them from the country. They kicked them out. Okay, and it just so happened a year or two later, in 1492, Christopher Columbus comes knocking on their door, which we just recently found out through DNA evidence that Christopher Columbus was Jewish. So there was an old rumor that Christopher Columbus was used by Ferdinand and Isabella to possibly find new lands for the Jewish people that had been expelled from their country so that they could go and live. So, if you still celebrate Columbus Day, know Christopher Columbus is Jewish. He was Jewish. Okay? And so they kicked out all of the Jewish people. Well, I think I don't know if they were still alive, Ferdinand and Isabella, they may have been, but they had a daughter named Catherine, and they needed to wed Catherine. And so what they did was they knew there was this handsome man in England that they could marry and possibly unite their kingdoms together, and his name was Henry VIII. So Catherine of Aragon wed Henry VIII as his first wife. Okay, but if you don't know the stories, Catherine could not have she had a daughter named Mary, but didn't bore him any male heirs. So Henry VIII divorced her. He essentially kicked her out of his kingship. Do you know how embarrassing that was? Maybe not to Ferdinand and Isabel, but their family. Because Ferdinand and Isabel were both dead when this happened. But to the family and to the Spanish Empire. Why did this happen? Well, you kicked the Jewish people out of your country. So Henry VIII kicked your daughter out of his. Now, Catherine still lived in England, but she was basically essentially shunned away. And her daughter Mary is going to become Queen of England and go on a bloody rampage. That's why she's sometimes nicknamed Bloody Mary. We have a drink named after her. Okay, but yeah, no, that's what she did. Okay, and that's what they did. Why? Because of what Ferdinand and Isabella did to the Jewish people. It was done back on their heads. Okay, the Ottoman Empire came against and controlled the land of Israel for 400 years, and then they were exactly 400 years, and then they were disassembled after World War I. Why did God disassemble them? Because He needed the land available and be under friendlier country, which England was, to bring the Jewish people back. Okay? Now, in modern times, Germany is, of course, with the Nazis. They're going to oppose the Jewish people in their country. They're going to basically imprison the Jewish people in their ghettos, is what they call them. They put up these fences, okay, around with barbed wire, okay, to keep the Jewish people kind of locked into these certain areas. Okay, eventually they're going to put them into concentration camps. Okay, where they'll have real barbed wire. They're going to segregate them out of the German society and eventually start eradicating them. And some 6 million Jews are going to die in the Holocaust. Well, fast forward to the end of World War II. The city of Berlin and half of Germany, they're going to build a giant wall. It's called the Berlin Wall, and they're going to build an iron curtain along Germany. They're going to separate Germany into east and west. They are going to segregate German people. Why? Because the Nazis set up fences around the Jewish people. Now God is going to put a fence up between them. And the people of East Germany are going to suffer under communist rule for the next almost 50 years. What you do to the Jewish people will be brought back on your own head. And the last example I will use of it is this. Joseph Stalin, the maniac who ran Russia for 30 years. Okay. When he, in 1953, he was getting ready to eradicate all the Jewish people within Russia. Okay, he was getting ready. It was called the Doctor's Plot, because a lot of his doctors were Jewish, and some of the people that were the original founders of, I think Lenin was Jewish. I think he was. Now don't quote me on that, but he may have been. But some of them, I know Trotsky was. But a lot of them were Jewish, and so a lot of his doctors were Jewish, and he was feeling pretty bad, so he was thinking they were trying to kill him. Okay, so Stalin had ordered placed out an order that basically they were going to start building concentration camps to segregate the Jewish people, and he was going to put them in there and then eventually kill them all. He was going to try to eradicate all million and a half Jews that were living in Russia at that time, Russian Jews. Okay. A week before he was going to implement that program. Stalin had a brain hemorrhage and died. Coincidence? I don't think so. It literally came back, because if you know what a brain hemorrhage is, that's on your own head. It came back on his own head. So that saved all those Russian Jews who could now go to. Because in a few years, in about 30 years or so, many of them maybe still alive, were able to go to the land of Israel now and make Aliyah. And because if he had eradicated all the Jews in his country, then the prophecy of being able to bring them from the four corners wouldn't be able to come true. So God stopped him. You see how that works? So as you can see in history, you can see it. The 6 Day War happened. It happened in 6 days, where the Arab nations tried to come against Israel, and they defeated them in 6 days. What war have you ever heard of in 6 days? They're surrounded by their enemies. God has a purpose for them. They're never going to be uprooted from their land. Ever. They're not even going to be uprooted in the end times. They're going to still be there. The 6 Day War. And the U.S. right now, it's my view, the only reason why we're continuing to be blessed is because of what we've done, is because of our support of the nation of Israel. That's the only reason why I think God has not gotten rid of us right now. We are so horribly into Romans chapter 1 as a nation. We're terribly into that. It's God should destroy us. But I think once we turn our back on Israel, that's it. That's the final nail in the coffin for the United States of America. That's the final nail. It will come. Okay, it will come. But I think that's the only reason why we've been blessed. We've gone through craziness. Over the free love movement, wars we shouldn't have been involved in. Just craziness with all the stuff going on right now. With just, I won't get into that because I'll probably be banned on YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about. Just the insanity that's going on in this country. The only reason why we're continuing to be blessed is our relationship with the nation of Israel. Okay? Because it's not a relationship with God. We're trying to push God. We push God out of the schools. We're not allowed to pray. Most people don't go to church. There's no reason why God should spare us at all. It's because he upholds the Genesis 12:3 blessing. And I will say this, that I know that blessing is true because I've seen it in my own life. I support a organization that helps out the Jewish people in the land of Israel, and my life has been blessed because of it. Not always financially, but I have been blessed in so many ways. I've seen things that happen. One of the first examples was the first time I really needed to. I didn't even know that this would happen, but I just had this tugging from God to do this. So I gave to the organization. This was like 18, 19 years ago, and within a month or two, I finally got a job that I really wanted. It's things like that. It's not going to guarantee you $1 million or anything like that. It's nothing like that. But if you fulfill that, I've been giving steadily to that organization and to the nation of Israel for the last 18 years. I could tell you that Genesis 12:3, God keeps his word. God keeps his word. I have been blessed from that. Not all the time financially. Sometimes it's little things. Like sometimes it is financial, but sometimes it's little things where, like I've given to that, and then I'll use this just as an example. It didn't happen, but it could be something like this. It's like all of a sudden, I give that organization, and then a plumber comes over to the house, and I'm sitting there going, well, what seems to be can you take a look at this? And the guy looks at it and goes, oh, there's no problem, and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, well, that's no problem. How much do I owe? He goes, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We won't worry about that. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. See, stuff like that. I didn't get anything financially, but it didn't cost me anything for that plumber. Does that make sense? That didn't happen, but I'm just using that as an example. It's things like that, little things like that God, He blesses you. He does. He blesses you. If you do that, He upholds that word. Okay? And He also holds on to that word. If you don't believe that curse works, try it. Go against the Jewish people and see what happens. Go against the nation of Israel. Now, I do want to make this clear, too. Just because it does not mean if you're a Christian, I believe the Lord has called you to support the Jewish people, okay, the nation of Israel. That does not mean that you have to agree with what the government's doing. No more than in this country, if you're an American and you support our country, you always have to agree with what the president's doing. Okay? Because I know many Christians didn't like this last president. Okay? But that doesn't mean that they hate the country. And they hate all Americans. And they think that country should be wiped off or done this. That does not mean that. Okay? It does not mean that. You don't necessarily have to support the government. Whether you support the current government in Israel is irrelevant. You can agree or disagree. God has called you to support the nation, the people in it. Because maybe many of the people in that country don't support what the government's doing. Just like this, do you want people to hate America and hate our country and wish all these bad things happened to us simply because who the president is? Or because of a policy they're doing? Of course not. And I also want to be clear that talking about this does not mean, I'm not saying that the Jewish people are saved. There's only one way to salvation. That's through Jesus Christ. John 14:6. I am the way. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. That includes Jew and Gentile. Does not matter who it is. They have to go. It doesn't mean they're saved. But that does mean that we should support them and be friendly with them. And I'll talk more about that as we go on with these other videos. Okay? Right, thank you all for tuning in again. It's been another great study. I hope you liked the history lessons a little bit. I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but I love history. All right? Please share. I would say please like this video and subscribe to the channel and share this video with anyone. It's completely 100% free. Share it with anybody who you may know. I also have one that's the gospel message. So if you have a family member, anybody you know that needs to hear the gospel, I have a video. You can look at it. It's the gospel message, okay? And send that to anybody that you know that needs it, okay? I also have this video on Rumble. I also have a Facebook page called 30 Minute Gospel with Chris, so you can definitely tune in or like and follow that as well. I also have an email if you'd like to reach me. It's 30minutegospel@gmail.com. That 30 is a 30. That description is available, or that email address is available in the description of this video and also on my YouTube page. Okay? All right, well, thank you all again, and I will leave you with this. Remember, just as Theodore Roosevelt once said, a thorough knowledge of the Bible is worth more than a college education. God bless you all.